Hello there, my friend. Welcome to another episode of Talk Music Talk with Boyce. I am Boyce. This is my podcast you are listening to. Talk Music Talk is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people connected to music from different genres and different backgrounds, established and emerging singers, singer-songwriters, music therapists, music journalists. And on this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to Amy Andersson, internationally known conductor. She has toured throughout 14 countries in settings from Broadway to symphonic to gaming. And this year she has founded her very own ensemble. It is called the Orchestra Moderne NYC. The debut is coming up October 7th here in New York at Carnegie Hall, 8 p.m. The premiere program will be The Journey to America, From Repression to Freedom, Part 1, and it celebrates the legacy of immigration to America. We talk about not only what it's like to start her own ensemble and why she chose immigration as a theme, but also what made her want to be a conductor and what she has to convey as a conductor, how she keeps performances fresh for her. We talk about diversity in orchestras or the lack thereof and what she's doing to help change that. And also we get her experience as a female conductor when there are so few in the profession. This was a great conversation with Amy. I had a pleasure speaking to her. I know you will enjoy it too. Here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Amy Andersson on Talk Music Talk. Enjoy. So you can correct me that you have conducted Broadway, operatic, what else? Video, game repertoire,
and symphonic. Repertoire.
Do these call upon different skills, sets, talents from you?
Essentially, no.
Okay.
Because the job of a conductor is to communicate wordlessly through gestures the emotional and musical intent of the composer.
Yeah.
And so in each musical genre, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Whether it's a serious, big romantic score or a video game score. It all requires that same task, fulfilling of that task. So actually, it's not really any different.
Okay.
There are some technical differentials, but basically no.
Okay. What's the example of it?
Well, for a video game concert, the video game music is synced in with the visuals on the big screen, right? So the music has to be precisely in sync with the visuals, or it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so how we do that is that the orchestra and I have a click track that we use. It means that we have a little earpiece and we have a little wireless pack that fits on the belt strap, and we listen to the click. And so all those clicks are showing us where we need to be in terms of the beat to be in sync with the visuals. Okay. So I don't use a click track with any other music except a video game. A film score music, if you're going to sync it with a like Raiders of the Lost Ark, they would also use a click track. Okay. That's really the only technical difference in conducting those different kinds.
Okay. Is it possible where the click track messes up? Has that ever happened?
Well, the click track never messes up because it's in the computer and it's a set program. The question is, does the conductor ever mess up with the click track?
Has that ever happened?
I don't think I've ever messed up with the click track.
Good for you.
And as a matter of fact, I did a show in Rome in 2015 where we didn't have the earbuds and the sort of wireless packs for the orchestra arrive with the luggage. So they didn't have the click. And I had a click, but it doesn't help because they can't hear the click. Yeah. So I conducted the whole show without a click, but was able to stay in sync with the visuals within 3 seconds. Okay. And that was incredibly difficult. That's not something that you'd like to do. Yeah.
So does that feel like a thrill ride, the entire performance?
Yeah, it was a thrill and it was also terrifying. Because I didn't want to get out of sync for the audience. If we finish before the visual's finished, or the visual finishes before us, it doesn't really make sense. And so I didn't want to have that happen to them, so I fought very valiantly, in my opinion, to do that for 90 minutes. It was hard, but we managed, and So
yeah, what makes a challenging evening of conducting? What can make it challenging?
Any kind of music, if any. Well, every time I step onto the podium, and I think most conductors would probably say this is true, it's a challenge to get onto the podium knowing what you have to do. Yeah. The responsibility that one takes, you have to, responsibility for the musicians, the responsibility for the audience to convey everything, to do a compelling performance. That is a challenge, actually. But that's not something that I actually think about when I get up there. Okay. I mean, in the back of my mind, I know that I have a great responsibility to be up there, to deserve to stand there. Yeah. But then, you know, I let it happen, and I work so hard that it kind of blossoms. And that, I guess it is a challenge to always keep it fresh, to keep it real, to keep it spontaneous, to be true to the music. That is a challenge, but that becomes sort of secondary to the joy then that percolates up, you know, through the orchestra, through the musicians. You feel it in the audience.
And how do you keep it fresh with your? Because you're doing a 2-year show.
I just finished a 2-year show, and that was all done with click track. Yeah. So one could just go up there and just beat with the click and let the musicians play. But that's incredibly boring, and music is much more complex. Yeah. And the music that was composed for these video games deserves much more attention. So I tried to constantly do something new every show. Bring out an inner line, bring out the violas, accentuate the bass line, pay more attention to the solos in the orchestra. I tried to shape and create it as though there was no click track. Because if I'm not creative on the podium, I'm bored, and if I'm bored, I don't deserve to be there. Nobody wants to see a boring conductor. So I kept it creative and fresh for myself and for the musicians and for those composers who oftentimes go, or arrangers, orchestrators who go sort of unnoticed in all of that, right? Yeah. Behind the big brand are orchestrators who work for years to orchestrate these huge games.
Now, are those in-the-moment choices you're making to keep it fresh?
Yes, absolutely. They're spontaneous. It has to do with the musicians and their level of playing and what's happening. If certain people need a little more encouragement, you know, certain soloists need more encouragement, then I'll look at them more, encourage them more, and give them more contact, that kind of thing. It's all done really, yes, in the moment. Yeah. And that's what makes performing so fun, challenging, as you mentioned, but also thrilling because it's all spontaneous. Right? It's the element of you never know what's going to happen.
Do you have to get yourself into a certain mindset before each performance, or any kind of routine you do?
I don't really have a routine other than, well, it depends. You know, if I did this video game show for 2 years, and so I knew every note by memory, and there was not a lot I had to do to kind of mentally go there. I just because I knew what was going to happen. But for other things, if I'm doing a full-length opera or I'm doing a program that I have never done before, I spend time maybe a half an hour before just mentally going through important points, sort of talking to the composer if it's dead, if he or she is dead or alive, right? And asking myself, am I truly in service of this composer? And am I really doing what I think the composer intended? And I sort of check in with the composer in some kind of esoteric way, and check in with myself and make sure my ego hasn't gotten in the way. And then I just say, let the magic happen.
How did that start for you, that you check in with the composer? That's available to you?
Well, as musicians, we constantly look at the score, and we're always double-checking to make sure, did the composer mean this accent in this way or that way? Is that diminuendo? As long as we're doing it, you know, we're always trying to think, what did the composer intend? Some composers mark every little thing, like Mahler marked every little thing. He has a trillion different details. But in other composers score, in Mozart or in Beethoven, other composers, there's not as many markings. And so you have to sort of guess on performance practice, you know, stylistic practice of that time. Would you do it this way, or should I do it this way? Did they attend it? You know, that's the fun part to discover. But at a certain point, you have to make a decision. It doesn't mean you have to make that decision forever and do it always. That you can change. It's nice to change and come back years later and say, I actually think the composer meant this, and to do it differently. Checking in with a composer, I don't know. I've always been kind of a spiritual person. I feel that the soul never dies, that we come out of body, and that we're always there, and that realm is accessible whenever we need it, whether it be a deceased family member or a neighbor or a loved one or a composer. And I often ask questions and say, please guide me, or give me an idea of, if this is the right thing. It seems to work. I mean, I truly believe there's guidance everywhere.
Yeah, same here.
And so I check in with Brahms and I check in with Beethoven, and I ask them, if there's anything I need to discover, help me along the way.
So is it this type of thinking, maybe other conductors don't do that gives each orchestra, whatever they're doing, its character? That makes it different?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Is this sort of like the type of thing, like when you make choices like that, maybe another conductor doesn't, but this is what gives each symphony its character? Right.
Every conductor has different background. We all have different minds. We all see things differently and hear things differently, perceive things differently, have different life experiences. All the experiences that we've had in our life, we bring to the podium at that moment. So we're all very uniquely different, and so we're going to interpret things differently. Process information differently. We have different imaginations as musicians. I mean, this goes for artists, musicians, dancers, poets, writers, choreographies, right? We all kind of channel this information in a different way. That's what makes it so interesting to see how many voices there are and how different and how valid each voice is. So conductors are very different, and the tempi they take, and some play things slowly, some play things very, very quickly, depending on their heartbeat, their state of health, their anxiety, their state of mind, musical conviction. Right? It's very personal, and yet you try not to make it too personal because it really is about the composer. That's the two things you work with. You know that you have your own ideas to give, your own expression, but then you know that at the end of the day, you really need to be faithful to the composer, so you try not to go too far and make it all about yourself, because that's really not what it's about.
Yeah. Right? And when did you decide that you wanted to be a conductor?
I probably wanted to be a conductor way back in middle school, and certainly in high school. I was a pianist and studied piano. I studied voice. I studied classical voice. I studied composition. And I started composing in middle school. And certainly all through high school I composed and took composition lessons and hung around. We only had a band. We had like a wind ensemble and band in high school. We had no orchestra. But I was always interested in ensembles and the playing and the musicians and what was this person in front doing? What are they conveying with their hands and their face? And then I studied at the University of Michigan, and I was a pianist, but I hung around the orchestra all the time, and I went to orchestra rehearsals, and I eventually started playing things like suspended cymbals and, celeste and xylophone if they needed auxiliary players. And I just fell in love with the orchestral repertoire. And I wasn't a violinist, and I really had no way of participating other than to become a conductor. Okay. And I started to see how incredible this silent language was, that you express physically the musical ideas, and you don't really have to say anything. And how does that work, and how do you learn that? So I started studying conducting, and I was just, I said, this is how I want to express myself in music, through that physical, right? That physical dance of embodying the music really through everything, fingers and hands and face. And it comes from everything.
Did you do the miming it in the mirror at home that you were conducting before you ever did it?
I didn't do much of that. I know that I conducted a lot to the TV, watching other conductors when I was young and conducting along, but I don't think I could bear just to stare at myself in the mirror. They often say look in the mirror, but I thought it was ridiculous. But I just went to a lot of concerts and saw a lot of conductors, and I said, I was compelled to do that, and I felt I had something to say.
Mm-hmm. What did you think you had to say?
I thought and I still do believe I have a deeply expressive kind of connection to the music that I can bring as just an individual, something different than other people. We all bring something different, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like I was in touch with whatever that was. I was in touch with that and could then bring that to the orchestra, right?
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah. And so what is, like, when you go to school for conducting, like, how do they teach you to conduct? Like, what are early steps?
Early steps would be learning how to move your hands and 2/4 or 3/4 or 6/8, how to use your right hand, how to use your left hand, how to study the score, how to mark your score, how to listen to the harmony, how to show the orchestra what you're hearing, right? And how to move your hands, and those are just the basics.
Yeah.
But then it comes to advanced classes where you're conducting two pianos, and the pianists are playing maybe a Brahms symphony, and they've split it up. One person plays the winds, and the other person plays the strings, and you practice giving entrances and downbeats, and then you see really that if you're not clear, they're not going to come in. It's not their fault; it's your fault, And so it takes years and years of of study and willingness to know that you can never know it all, and you're going to make mistakes, and it's up to you really to promote the evolution of your language, right? It's up to me to evolve and not go up and do Beethoven Fifth the same way every time.
Yeah.
I could never do that, right? So it's a lifelong pursuit, like any art form, right? Singing, dancing, choreography, ballet, writing. It constantly involves, if you know that that's your responsibility. It won't evolve if you feel like, well, I know it and I'm just going to do it. Now I'm professional and I want my paycheck.
Yeah, there's nothing to learn.
Leonard Bernstein said he was still a student, right? So if you are in the mindset that you are always a student, then you can discover a lot of beautiful things. Over and over.
Okay, so is there like constant things you need to do to keep perfecting it or getting better, keep learning? Or is it just the doing it?
I mean, physically or mentally, or musically and mentally. It's just studying deeply and thinking deeply, and you just have to continually kind of pursue and train your mind. It's training your mind to see things in a complex way, and training your inner ear to hear things in a complex way. And you need to kind of keep doing that in order to develop the facility. It's an endless amount of things you can learn. You can never learn all the repertoire. You can never conduct all the repertoire. You can never memorize all the repertoire. It takes many lives to do that. And so in that sense, it's a thrill because you're never going to get to the end and say, I've mastered it. I don't believe that's possible.
Yeah, it'd be boring if you thought you did.
There's always something to rediscover. You can go back to a piece of music that you studied 10 years ago and go back and say, oh, now I have an understanding because of what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Now I hear it differently. Now I see it differently. Now I feel it differently. And you can do that every several years and check back and say, I can't believe I was thinking it was this way. Now I'm totally convinced it's this way. Right?
Yeah. And what was your first major conducting? What was that like?
Well, major conducting, after I graduated in New York City at the Mannes College of Music, I moved to Germany and did my first productions in Germany, in Düsseldorf, in the Deutsche Oper am Rhein. I jumped in and did performances of the Magic Flute. They needed a substitute conductor, and I learned it very quickly and jumped in. And that was sort of the beginning of my career of first knowing that A, I don't know everything, and B, there's a lot to learn, and C, this is exactly what I want to be doing. So I started jumping in and doing productions and ended up teaching in Berlin at the university, teaching conducting students, touring with an international youth orchestra, doing productions in several houses as a regular guest conductor. I built my young early career in Europe, many years working there, and really learning how to put an opera production together, how it goes to what all the moving parts are, and what it takes, the details and the big picture, and how it has to be paced in terms of rehearsals, and how to keep going and know that you're going to make it by the premiere. You're not going to fall short, right? That was probably the best training of my life. Opera is incredibly complex. Yeah. You're dealing with stage directors and singers, right? And the orchestra. And I think if you can conduct orchestra, you can do almost anything. It's very, very complicated. And anything can happen at any given moment with a singer on stage who jumps in 10 measures too early or gets lost, or so that gave me my real solid musical training, and from there I just jumped to different things.
Did you enjoy that part, the putting together of shows, also, not just the conducting part?
Well, I didn't have to put together those shows. I mean, so we had producers, and we had. I was always a music director of the opera, and then there's stage directors. But you have to work together as a team, and you have to talk to the stage director, because the singers, what they're doing on stage affects how they sing, and whether or not they can see you, and if they're upside down, or they're lying on their back, or they're turned away from you, and they can't. You have to talk about. They can't even see me, and I can't even hear them. So could you have them come down the steps a little earlier so they can at least see me, give them a cue, and so that was teamwork. In that sense.
And you can correct me about this. I saw a statistic that only 20% of conductors are women. Is that right?
Yeah, maybe even less. Yeah. Did
that ever play a part? I'm not seeing women. Is this something I still can do? Is available to me when you're not seeing a lot of you?
Yeah, it goes into the whole topic of diversity in music, which is inclusive of minorities and African Americans, women composers, women conductors. It's why is there such a lack of diversity? And it was sort of discouraging along the way, although I never let it deter me from doing what I dreamed and wanted to do. But it's constantly in the conversation, why aren't there more women conductors? And then the conversation, why aren't there more minority and African Americans in symphony orchestras? Why? What's the reason? And so that's one of the reasons why I formed this new orchestra that's making its debut at Carnegie Hall. We can get into a discussion about that, because I feel very passionate about
But I am curious a little bit about your. What were you composing? You said when you were in high school.
Well, I was composing small ensemble pieces. I did a choir piece. I did a small wind ensemble piece. I did sonata for flute and piano. I did those kinds of things. I had an affinity for composing, but I felt conducting was such an all-consuming thing. It took so much time. It takes more than a lifetime, and I'm not Leonard Bernstein. I couldn't do both.
Do you miss composing any?
I do in a way, but it's a very difficult, solitary profession. And one sits for months and weeks and days and years alone composing. And I don't think that is something that I really enjoy. I at least get to go to the orchestra and do rehearsals and do performances, and I love to be around people. I like my solitary time, but I like to be around people. And from the composers that I know and love and have talked to, they say it's sort of an excruciating process to pull this out and to do all these hours alone. I really almost didn't have a disposition to do that. I think it would have been very hard. It's somewhat torturous process.
Okay. So so speaking back to the diversity, and did anyone ever say to you, like, well, this is going to be a long, hard road for you because you're a woman? Did you ever hear any of that?
Not in those words, but I heard sometimes shocking things along the way. Throughout the years, well, our music school doesn't take women conductors, or our competition doesn't accept women conductors back then in the day. Our artist agency already has a woman conductor. Okay. It's sometimes the small things that go on for years rather than just the one-line zinger that kind of kills you. It was the small things. But, I had to say to myself, it's just ignorance. Yeah. It's ignorance, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's what you bring into what you're doing now.
Yes, although I can't say that I can in any way identify with the suffering that comes with minorities and the exclusion of minorities and African Americans in classical music, because I am a white woman, and just being born in that demographic makes me a person of privilege. So I couldn't even begin to imagine. But it did stimulate the thought process. I mean, I conducted in 20 countries. I toured in the last 2 years to 14. I did 65 shows, and almost every single orchestra was white. Yeah. All across the United States, in Europe and Canada and Mexico. Yeah. And there's an orchestra contractor who's hired for each concert, and they can hire who they want. Okay. But the orchestra contractors were white, and so they tended to hire who they know. Yeah. And so after being on tour for 2 years, I decided I need to move on to something else. And I retired from the tour in January 2017. Okay. And I woke up one morning, I thought, well, I'll take some time off. And after about 3 weeks, I was starting again. I said, I can't do this anymore. I started thinking, I can't really conduct orchestras that don't embrace inclusivity and diversity. How are they reflecting their community if they don't have diversity in the orchestra? And I said, I have to change it. I want to be the change that I want to see in the world. Yeah. So I said, I'm going to form a new orchestra in New York, and we're going to do video game music and film score music and contemporary music, and have women composers, right? And a woman conductor.
Imagine that.
And I'm going to create diversity in the orchestra and make the programs culturally relevant. Yeah. Because I saw millennials from 18 to 38-year-olds who don't go to orchestra concerts because they're frankly not interested in hearing Beethoven, because they don't really identify with him anymore. It's been such a long time. It's great music, but they don't identify. Yeah. We're in a visual society where you see Instagram and Twitter and there's video games, right? And they want more than a Beethoven symphony. And I saw people of all ages come to these video game concerts from the age of 3 to 65 to 75. And I said, millennials are out there. You just need to honor what they love, which is a visual experience with projected visuals, with singers, with actors, with dancers, and play culturally relevant music. So I put together this program on immigration to honor immigrants, because it's a cultural hot button issue at the moment. Nobody else is doing concerts like that. Yeah. I said, come on, really? Yeah. I'm going to recruit a diverse orchestra, and we're going to be a game-changing ensemble that just says the times have changed. We're moving into the future with a new paradigm. I'm dreaming of funding a major collaboration with an African-American composer. It's all set in my mind. Yeah. I've communicated with this person. It's ready to go. We have to just find the funding, because that needs to be done. Yeah, yeah. We need to change the dialogue, and we need to have orchestras. This orchestra is going to reflect the community in which we're in. And how can we expect audiences to be diverse. They're not. The audiences that go to the New York Philharmonic are not diverse.
Yeah.
The orchestra is not diverse. And that doesn't reflect the city that we live in. New York is such an incredible place. And so orchestras have suffered in terms of declining ticket sales for the last 40 years. And they've been scratching their heads and wondering why aren't people coming. Because young people expect more.
Yeah.
The bar is higher now, right? They expect that we're going to be inclusive, we're going to be diverse and reflect the community. I mean, that's almost like a given. And if it's not, people don't relate to the music they're playing, right? To the programs, to the concepts. So I created this because I said, I need to create the change that I want to see in the world.
Yeah. And how did you decide on immigration being the first thing that you would do? Because of current events?
Well, it kind of evolved from current events, but also I was just conversing with LA film composers that I know and thinking of a piece of music, and the concert opens with Overture to Light by Lolita Ritmanis. Okay. I had met her a few months previously in LA, and she's a 10-time Emmy-nominated composer and writes for film and television. She's wonderful. And I said, Lolita, I've got to program one of your pieces on a concert that I'm going to do sometime in the future. And she sent me this Overture to Light, and I said, this is a beautiful 10-minute overture. What's it about? And she said, it's about 200,000 Latvians fleeing Latvia, including my parents, in 1944. I said, my goodness. Yeah. And it celebrates then Latvia gaining independence from Russia in 1991. And so I had that sort of there. And then I met a composer, Stephen Lebetkin, here in New York. And he said, I have this new violin concerto. I'd love to have it premiered. And I listened to that. And we talked about the influence of his teacher, Karl Rathaus, who came from Germany, who fled the Nazis, and immigrant composers. And I mean, any musician or any choreographer or writer, we're aware of the melting pot and the influence, the beautiful influence that people have who come from all over the world. And then I was in conversation with somebody about Peter Boyer, who wrote Ellis Island, The Dream of America. And I said, that's it. I have my program. It's in immigration. And, you know, who knows? Sometimes I come up with things, or we come up with things that, you know, that's like they're percolating in our minds because we're reading the news or we're thinking of things. And then all the dots connect. Yeah. So I just suddenly I woke up one morning and I said, okay, this is it. It's a conversation about immigration, how it affects all of us. And then, of course, I said, well, the other side of the coin is African Americans didn't have Ellis Island. They had no rights, right? They didn't come over on a ship in the way that the Ellis Island immigrants, and they were thrown in the holds of ships with chains. That whole legacy hasn't been talked about musically ever with orchestras. That's my next project.
That sounds beautiful.
Right. So music, I mean, I'm not a politician. I can't change the world. But through music, hopefully, I can create changes, right? Yeah. Create a dialogue, provoke conversation.
Which one of the most powerful ways?
Yes, because sometimes we don't find the words, right? We can't have those difficult conversations. But musically, it speaks without words and it goes right to the heart. Yeah. Right? So that's been my passion for the last 7 months, creating something new. Because, like I said, I can't change the world and do politics. I can't be political now, and as I'm not an elected official, but in my own way, I can try to make a change.
Well, that's the best way we have. Yeah. Yeah, it's authentic coming from you. And I've always said that there has to be intentionality if you're going to have diversity. It's not just going to happen by accident.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel an obligation, because I've had a life of privilege. I have, just being born who I am. Yeah. Even though it was difficult being a women conductor. Come on, it's nothing compared to what other people suffer through. Yeah. I feel an obligation to give back. I feel an obligation to do that. How could I not? Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all in this world together. And I say we're all going to sink or we're all going to swim. And if African Americans and minorities, if they do well, we all do well. Isn't it a no-brainer?
You would think.
I mean, it benefits all of us. We all rise up together, right?
Yeah.
I don't, how could it be so disconnected? So I feel I have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
How could I not? How could I not care?
Yeah. Well, how do you get to be that? Because there are people, like, if it doesn't affect your life directly, it's kind of not your problem.
I think that I'm an incredibly sensitive person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just very intuitive, very sensitive, and I pick up on others' suffering. I'm just that way. I feel the suffering of the world, and I feel the suffering of people on the street, and I suffer when I see animals who are chained to a post, and I've always been that way. I can't block all of that out and say, you know what, I can't change it, it's not my problem.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the pain of others.
Yeah. Is that you're an empath?
Sorry?
Are you an empath?
What's an empath?
People, they feel the energy of other people.
Maybe I am.
Yeah.
Maybe I am. And, I've had people say, oh, come on, you worry too much about the world, or enjoy your life, you have so many wonderful things. And I do enjoy my life, and there are wonderful things, but I just can't block out the bad stuff, because it's all mixed up. I mean, good and evil coexist simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful and pain and beauty and grief and suffering and joy. It all coexists simultaneously, and I can't just separate it out and say, you know what, it's not my problem. It's just not how I'm put together. And it's not how I'm put together. So I feel an obligation, maybe because I do sense others' pain. I feel an obligation to do something about it. It's not just enough to sit there and say, oh, I feel the pain of this person, because that would be kind of self-indulgent. Yeah. I have to do something, right?
Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
What has some of the challenges been of putting this together, your own thing?
Well, I'm producing the show, so the challenge is largely sort of clerical in terms of spending way too much time at the computer, putting together program notes and filling out all the forms and getting everybody at Carnegie on board with the concert and this and that and the stagehands and the stage plot and when does this go on and how many musicians and do you have, and we have 17 percussion instruments for one of the pieces, and it's just every single detail has to come into place. Yeah. And if it doesn't, it's because I've overlooked it. So that's something that, is very difficult to kind of... It's manageable, but it's difficult because I'm the musician who I'd love to study all day. Okay. Right? Because it feels so good. Yeah. The other stuff is tedious, but I have to do it in order to get from A to C. I got to go through B, and I have to go through all that stuff and send a million emails and remind people in order to get to the place I want to be. So it's part of the agreement that I made with myself. Okay. And I have people helping me, but at the end of the day, if I don't look over that email and check the details one more time, it falls on you. Yeah, it falls on me, which it's okay because I'm used to taking great responsibility. I kind of function well under pressure, and I function well when I have a huge responsibility. I actually like that. Yeah. I don't like to delegate as much, or I've never joined groups where everyone meets and they talk about what are they going to do and then they assign you to do something. I don't function well. I'd rather leave the group or take control and do it. One or the other. Yeah, it's just the way I am, right? I'm not a follower, I'm a leader. So I've learned an incredible amount about I'm working with this wonderful orchestra contractor, John Miller here, who's one of the great contractors for all the Broadway shows. He knows absolutely everybody here. And he's been like a mentor and a wise man to me, and how to facilitate the hiring of the musicians and how to deal with the union and those things. He's been great. And that's, as a conductor, you don't, unless it's your own orchestra and you're producing a show, you don't get into the logistics of, the cost of the musicians or the Social Security, their retirement or the pension and all that kind of stuff. But I've had to dip my toe in that water, and it's good. It's really good to know the mechanics of an orchestra. Yeah. And the non-musical mechanics, right? So At the end of the day, I'm grateful to have learned as much as I have so far. Mm-hmm. And we still have a few more weeks, and there's quite a few things to do. But
October 7th.
It's been a wonderful process. Mm-hmm. And the musicians are very excited. We've hired the top musicians in New York City from the Metropolitan Opera, Broadway shows, St. Luke's Chamber Orchestra, faculty at Juilliard. Mm-hmm. And they're all thrilled to do this. And it's a different program, right?
Yeah.
It's a program of immigration. And it's something refreshing. It's music none of them know. They've never done, the Overture to Light has never been performed in the U.S.
Okay.
It's a world premiere of this violin concerto by Stephen Lebetkin. And Ellis Island, The Dream of America, hasn't been done in Manhattan. I think it was done in Brooklyn maybe years ago, but it's never been done at Carnegie Hall. So it's refreshing because they tend to play the same repertoire, often.
Yeah.
And so they're all very excited. Mm-hmm. So it's something unique, and I'm quite confident it will be.
And this is your premiere.
Yes, it is. The Orchestra Moderne's premiere.
Okay.
At Carnegie Hall on October 7th on Saturday night. So.
How does that feel? That's your premiere.
It's great.
Yeah.
I've put so much energy into thinking about what is this about? What do we mean? What's our mission? How can we evoke change? How can we connect to the community? I'd love people to come to Carnegie Hall with T-shirts and jeans and sneakers. Mm-hmm. Who needs to dress up?
Yeah.
Carnegie Hall should be for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. Carnegie Hall should be for people who can only go with a student ID and get a ticket for $15. Yeah. So we're selling tickets from $17 or $15 if you have an ID, up to $50, and that's it.
Yeah.
No $300 tickets. There's no $400 tickets.
Okay.
This is for students, and you can come in T-shirt and jeans, and you can clap whenever you want. There's no rules. Nobody has to feel uptight, because that's conventional wisdom that's far behind. Yeah. That can't be the model on which we reach out to people and say, be part of us. We have something to give you.
Okay.
And also, I've hired two performance interpreters for the deaf community.
Okay.
And this is a first in Carnegie Hall. And it may be a first for a so-called classical orchestra concert. And because there are 40,000 members of the deaf community who have varying levels of hearing capacity. Some can't hear anything. Some hear the lower notes of the orchestra. Some hear the higher notes. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but they love to go to concerts. They love to go to shows. They want to get out and go to dinner and go to a concert, right? They want to be integrated part of this community. And they have been all largely pushed aside by the classical community. Again, why? Why would you do that? So we have on our poster at Carnegie Hall a recognized symbol for performance interpreter, interpreted concert with two hands. And I hired two wonderful interpreters who will, on the Ellis Island piece, translate or interpret the spoken dialogue from 7 actors that goes along with the Ellis Island. Okay. And then the other pieces will be interpreted, like an interpreter will say, and now the strings are playing, and here comes the horn, and here comes the trumpet solo, and because some of the Broadway shows, upon request, if you say, I'd like to go see Hamilton on Saturday night in 2 months, and I need an interpreter, there'll be somebody there if you put in a request. Okay. Right? So it's just part of me reaching out and saying, we're a community, and we all have things to give and share, and the deaf community needs to be acknowledged.
Part of that, yeah.
And so we're on the deaf community's website, music website, concert website, and we're hoping that they'll come out to see a wonderful show and enjoy it, right?
Yeah. Why not?
We're all one. We're all one. That's the thing. It's so easy and yet so difficult, right? But we're all one.
Yeah. Again, it speaks to being intentional.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what do you want people to walk away, you want to communicate when they leave out after seeing the performance?
I would like that they were touched by the program, that they saw something unexpected and different, that they realized that to this orchestra concert, you could come in T-shirt and jeans, and we're going to have an MC come and introduce the orchestra and introduce the pieces, that it was something different, and that they walk away and say, I'd like to go back to a concert.
Okay.
I'd like to go to any concert, but also Orchestra Moderne NYC. I'd like to go to their next concert.
Yeah.
Right? So I'd like them to be excited about classical music, because so-called classical music, right? That's a term that's almost outdated now. But symphonic music, a symphonic program, I'd love for them to say, I'd love to go back, and I'd like to bring my neighbors. I want to bring my kids, because this stuff really rocks.
Yeah.
Right?
That's beautiful. And best place for people to keep up with you online?
We have Orchestra Moderne NYC.com.
Okay.
That's our website. And we're posting things about Carnegie Hall. I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
I'm Amy Maestra, AMYMAESTRA. And I do a weekly Orchestra Moderne NYC musician portrait.
Okay.
So I post pictures of the people in
Okay.
the orchestra. I post pictures of the actors in the Ellis Island. I'm also on Twitter under the handle Amy Maestra, so we do social media. I'm also making public posts on Facebook about the concert. And as I said, tickets are on sale at carnegiehall.org. And you can use your student ID to get 20% off. We'd love students to come. We'd love everyone to feel like Carnegie Hall is for the community.
Yeah.
It's not just for the privileged few who can afford the expensive it's for New York.
Yes.
It's for Manhattan. It's for everyone. Everyone can walk through those doors. You know, well, if you can afford $15.
Yeah,
but and we're hoping to have a ticket giveaway in WQRX. I hope we can organize that.
Yeah.
Or is it QXR? I always forget. QXR.
I can't remember.
QXR. We're hoping to do a ticket giveaway for those maybe who can't afford to pay. So we're trying to make it for the community. That's the future, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amy. This was wonderful.
You're welcome. It was a real pleasure and an honor.
Yes, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Amy Andersson. If you happen to be in New York on October 7th, make sure you attend Orchestra Moderne NYC's The Journey to America at Carnegie Hall, 8 p.m. The website again is orchestramoderne-nyc.com, or head on over to carnegiehall.org. I'm online several places, talkmusictalk.com for more podcast information and to stream every single episode. I am also on Instagram at This Is Boyce, so follow me there. Some call to actions for you. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media, email it to a friend, leave a 5-star rating and or review wherever you happen to be listening, especially on iTunes, because word of mouth helps to grow the Talk Music Talk audience. Also, download the Talk Music Talk app. It is free for iPhone and Android, wherever you like to get your apps, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, pretty much everywhere. Just search for Talk Music Talk. You can also find the podcast on SoundCloud, starting with episode 100, soundcloud.com/This Is Boyce. All links in the show notes, of course. Thank you so much for listening to this episode with Amy Andersson. Till next time, and there will be a next time. This one's for you, Liz.